we're going to have the candidates in here in just about 45 minutes. We certainly want to be ready for that, since that will definitely be the highlight of all of our days. So on behalf of NAPS, let me be the first to welcome the classes of 67, 77, 87, and 97 in this phenomenal event. This is really, really special for us to do this here. I know that you probably think of it that way, but believe me, the school considers this to be a very, very special event. And what we're especially appreciative of is what's, like I said, what's going to occur in about 45 minutes. We really pumped the candidates up for it, so I think you're really going to enjoy that when we bring them in here. But I'm going to bore you with some PowerPoints first. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Captain Cory, the CEO of the Naval Academy Preparatory School. I took command in July, and I am not a NAPS graduate. I am an Academy graduate, class of 93. Did not come through NAPS. So I think when the superintendent had a list to pick from, I was probably, I filled most of the prerequisites for the job, and the only one that was probably missing is to be a NAPS graduate myself. Maybe next time they'll find somebody more suitable. But I'm very thrilled to be here, very honored to be here. And what I'd like to do is just give you a snapshot of what NAPS looks like today, and also on a few slides a little bit of a retrospective as well. So I'll put the mission up there. I won't read it to you, or maybe for the folks in the back, hopefully you can see that. But the emphasis there remains on moral, mental, and physical foundations. We want to set our candidates up for success at the Naval Academy, and of course we are also prepping for the Coast Guard Academy as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that during the presentation. So we recognize that we're a foundational program, and our goal here, everything we do is really focused on setting them up for success at the Naval Academy. This slide will be hard to read, especially for the folks in the back, but I put an organization slide up there just so you can understand what NAPS looks like today. So I do report to the superintendent of the Naval Academy. I understand it hasn't always been that way, but that's a change that occurred several years ago, and it has remained in place. And he reports directly to the CNO, so it's a very short chain of command. I like it that way. All of you also understand that it's a great thing to have your boss be about 1,000 miles away from you as well. It's an ideal situation. But he's a Rhode Islander. Admiral Carter is a Rhode Islander, native Rhode Islander, and he loves coming up here. So we do see a fair amount of him, which is also a great situation to be in. My executive officer is Billy Rankin, a Marine, Major Billy Rankin. She's been here a few years and is a great resource. She doubles both as the XO and the battalion officer, so she's by far the busiest person, or one of the busiest people on our staff. Combine your busyness with classmate back there, Mark Donahue, who I'll talk about in a second. We have a Command Master Chief as well, Jason Edney. And you'll get to meet Billy and Jason as the day goes along here. And then we're really organizing the 4 departments. Our academic department is led by Dean Carl Crockett. Brian Browse is our athletic director. Command Services is under Mark Donahue. And then, of course, the battalion officer, who, like I said, is Major Rankin. And we're organized into 3 companies. And I'll get into the battalion organization here in a second. Again, this is not a brief about our structure here, but just to give you a feel for what the command looks like today. In total, we have a staff of about 80 to 85 folks. And that's broken up, the predominance of that is actually in civilians. It's in our civilian faculty. The faculty is 100% civilian now. So in terms of military staff, it's about 24 folks. And the predominance of our faculty and our civilians are in our civilian faculty and in our coaching staff as well. Okay, so here we are on Cottingham Point. And you'll get tours later on. You're all going to become drags and get dragged around by a midshipman candidate, many of whom will be doing it for the first time, so this is a great experience for them. In a few weeks, we'll have our open house, and their parents and their loved ones will be here, and they'll get to drag their parents and their loved ones around. So we all know what it's like to have a drag. So today you get to be drags and enjoy that experience as well. So keep in mind it'll be the first time for a few of them, so you might want to mention them a little bit in that experience. But of course we're in K Hall here, and I just want to point out a few landmarks. So on this side, of course, is Pritchard Field down towards the water. Naval, for those of you that remember eating that dining hall, is still there, still back in this corner. You'll notice that big empty field where Nimitz Hall used to be. Nimitz Hall was replaced by Ripley Hall across the street from us here, and you'll all get a chance to go in there later on a few years ago. King Hall still stands, and it's part of OTCM, Officer Training Command Newport, which includes both OCS and a few other officer commissioning programs, but OCS is the big one. The core of the NAP facilities are Nimitz Field, Ripley Hall, and Perry Hall. Perry Hall is where we have all of our administration and also where we have all of our classrooms and our laboratories as well. Again, you're going to get to see all this, but I wanted to put the big map up there so you can get the overview of what training country looks like this day. Also out here in training country, as I mentioned, is OCTN, Officer Training Command Newport, and we also share it with some Marine training activities that occur out here as well. Okay, and I told you I'd tell you what the battalion organization looks like these days. We are divided up into 3 companies. Each one has a company officer, currently 2 Navy lieutenants and 1 Marine Corps captain, and they're all phenomenal. And each company also has a senior enlisted leader, a chief petty officer as well, 3 chief petty officers. And we also have a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant attached to us as well as our drill sergeant who leads our drill and also heads our PT activities as well. And then each company is further broken down into platoons, so a total of 6 platoons, 1-1, 1-2, 2-1, 2-2, and so forth. And of course, within the organization, within the battalion, we have the striper organization. And you'll get to see that later on today when you see them with their ranks on, and you'll get to see who the stripers are and so forth. So probably not too much of a departure from what you remember while you were here, but I wanted to show you how we still do it these days. Okay, now here are some things that may be a little bit different. I'm going to tell you what the composition of NAPs are these days to give you an idea of who's attending NAPs and what we're doing here. So this is this year's class, 2018. So we started out with 272 total midshipmen and cadet candidates. So it was 252 Navy and 20 Coast Guard candidates that started with us as well. We're doing pretty well. We lost a few along the way, but our retention is doing fairly well so far. So about 3/4 men and 1/4 women, and that's very consistent with the academy. Right now, the total population of the academy is about 26 to 27% women. So that's very consistent with what they're doing. In the bottom right, we show a little bit more of a breakout in terms of our prior enlisted. So you can see we have 39 Navy prior enlisted here, attending here, 8 Marine Corps prior enlisted, and then I already talked about our Coast Guard, which means direct entries are 205. Those are folks coming mostly directly out of high school, but some of them coming out of a year of college or doing something else after high school and coming into NAPS. To further break down in terms of demographics, let me talk about diversity here. The Naval Academy Prep School is very much a source of diversity for the Naval Academy. And these are the other racial and ethnic groups as self-identified by this year's candidate class. So you can see about 26%, for example, of this year's class are self-identify as African American. In total, it's 62 other racial and ethnic groups other than white and Caucasian, 62%. That's nearly inverse of the academy. At the academy, about 60% would be white, Caucasian, about 40% would be identified as other racial ethnic groups. So we're about inverse of that, and we are very much a source of diversity for the academy. Another way to look at the diversity of the academy, of course, the academy typically always has representatives from all 50 states. We have a very diverse population in terms of where they hail from, where they grew up, and as well, you can see here from 39 different states, plus about 20 from overseas addresses too. Those are both prior enlisted who are coming from overseas addresses, but also children of either current or former sailors and Marines who are living overseas who have joined us as well. Okay, So this is a bit of a busy chart, but the bottom line here is I'm trying to give you an idea of what enrollment looks like for the years dating back to 1999. So if we look back over the last 20 years, what enrollment looks like, and this is just Navy. This doesn't include Coast Guard, and I've compared it at the bottom left here. I should say Steve has, since he built all these slides, of what the enrollment looks like. So we've averaged out at about 250. We've kind of settled out as over the last about 10 years or so as 250 being about the amount that we start with in terms of what we provide to the academy. Contrasted with prior years, you can see we've ebbed and we've flowed. 67, 77, and 87, you can see through those years we were a bit higher. But that's what we've settled into for a battalion size. Now, we hear about the Navy maybe getting bigger, and that could trickle down to us increasing our class size. I don't have any firm indicators of that yet. I'm still waiting word. If we needed to take more, we could take a few more. We'd run into some facility limitations after a little while. But we could pump up a little bit more if asked to do that, but that's where we're at right now. Okay, and so how do we do retention-wise? Again, another look back. These are some things that have maybe changed over the years. So I've started, or Steve has started at the class of 65, and we've worked our way forward here, and I've indicated for each of your classes, this is the retention just at NAPS, just who made it through that year. We're mandated to get 70% through in a DOD instruction that came out, I don't know, about 20 years ago or something like that. And we're doing pretty well at that. So last year we got about 80% of the class through. We seem to be settling out at about 80%, but shooting for more of those that finish. And this is the 1 year finishing through. When I first sat down with the superintendent upon taking the job, he explained to me his intention and his goal for NAPS. Which is that NAPS is not to be a filter. The way the Academy looks at it is that our admissions process is a pretty good filter these days. So many people apply to the Academy, and there are frankly so many qualified candidates that we really do select the ones that we want to go on, that we want to be at the Academy. And so the job of the NAPS is not necessarily to further filter them out, but rather to be a pump. Maybe the subtitle of this slide is the transition of this institution from maybe more of a filter back in the day to more of a pump these days. We're very focused on the preparatory aspects with the assumption that each one of them has the talent, has the ability, was selected for this process. Now let's pump them up and see if we can get them there. Not all make it. Out of that 20% we lose every year, about 10%, roughly half, tend to be voluntary drops, and another 10% tend to be involuntary. They just fall short in one aspect or another of the program. Typically academics is our largest group there. But it gives you an idea over the years of where we've been and where we've come, and what the current sort of mission and goal of the institution is. So what does it take to move on to the Academy? This has probably not changed tremendously over the years, but just to give you an idea of what we're trying to get our midshipman candidates to accomplish in order to move on. We're looking for a grade point average of 2.2 or better without any grade below a C. We don't always get there. There are a few that start the year really on the low end of the GPA scale, but they work hard and they improve tremendously during the year. And so if we see sustained improvement, even though they may fall short of a 2.2, there may still be an opportunity for the superintendent to take them. We would address that on a case-by-case basis. And that gets into that second part, which is the improved and sustained grades. We also have looked for a certain standardized test score. That has to do with the Academy's average test scores. NAPS tends to be on the lower end of the Academy's average, and that's important to the Academy because of our standing in some of the athletic and academic conferences that we participate in as well. They have to pass the PRT, which these days is running push-ups and sit-ups, and be within body fat standards. We also look for them to have the requisite aptitude, conduct, and honor. And they still have to get all of their nominations, be that congressional, presidential, SecNav, whatever the nomination may be. So they applied last year. Their application is still good to the Academy, so they do not have to reapply. If they pass the standard and they are nominated, they will go. it's about getting through our program. Okay, and so now when they move on to the academy, I told you about what NAPS contributes to the academy, so these slides, although they're busy, kind of break it down a little bit further, and I'll try to give you a few more details of how to read this. So this is a little bit of what NAPS contributes. So what this shows you here is Navy priors. So NAPS contributes, on average, about 60% of the priors who go on to the academy. And in terms of Marine Corps, about 75%, 60 to 70%, maybe 75% of Marine Corps priors that go to the academy matriculate through NAPS. In terms of a couple of racial demographics or other racial ethnic groups, I've shown you African American and Hispanic, where you've got 40%, close to 60% matriculating through NAPS. So again, very much a feeder for diversity and other racial and ethnic groups to the academy as well. Just to give you an idea of the composition of NAPS that goes on to the academy. Now, this next slide here shows the representation of NAPSers among the plebe class of the academy and then among the graduating classes of the academy. So the plebe class is the green line and the graduating class is the red line over the years. So you can see at one point, towards 1970, 1969, 1970, 1971, your class represented 7.9% of the plebe class and 4.3% of the graduating class, and you were part of the academy. And as you move through, you can see each one of your classes there. And so over the years, NAPS has continued to increase its share of both the plebe classes and the graduating classes of the academy. And we're now hovering between about 15 to 20% mark, settling out. 17 and a half is pretty normal for us on both of those counts. And then how do we do in terms of graduation? We're mandated that NAPSers will be within 5% of direct entries in terms of graduation. So no, we're not supposed to trail direct entries by more than 5% in terms of graduation rate. That is our goal, to have NAPSers graduate within 5%. Now, no less than 5%. We can certainly exceed that if we've had in certain years. So again, the way to read this is direct entry graduation rates are the green bar. The direct entry graduation rate minus 5%, which is the DoD mandate, is the red bar just below it. And then the blue bar is the NAPS graduation rate. And you can see in some years we've exceeded, especially through the 80s and 90s. And then we went through a period where we trailed it here in the 2000s, but we're rapidly catching up here in 2017. And our classes that are at the academy right now look very strong. They're doing very well, and they look to be well within that 5% and may even exceed, in some cases, again, the direct entry graduation rate. My goal as a CO is to, of course, meet or exceed the direct entry graduation rate to give NAPSers that advantage that they need to excel in the academy. Okay. There we go. Okay, and finally, I think this might be the final statistic chart. This is the retention from the start of I-Day at NAPS through graduation at the academy. This is perhaps the most stark slide, or the most, not stark, but the most dramatic slide I'd like to show you today of the changes over the years. Starting in 1967, where only 1 out of 5 made it from I-Day to throwing their hat in the air on commissioning day at the academy. And now you can see that we're 2/3 and aiming to get better, finish that process. And there are a number of reasons for that, and we could talk about those reasons, but a lot of it has to do, I think a lot of it has to do, I admit this to myself all the time, we believe the quality of candidates continues to get better and better, even over our classes. And we also believe that we have a mindset of really trying hard to get them through to graduation. Attrition is not the mission, is what I'm telling you. Graduation is very much the mission. And there are a number of reasons for that. I will tell you, personally, I was here for the summer INDOC program. We had a cadre of 50 midshipmen who came from the academy to run our summer INDOC program. And I was incredibly impressed with what I saw. The quality of midshipmen that I saw I'll just tell you what I told them, is that they in every way met or exceeded my expectations, and when I looked at them and when I thought about my own class, I was extremely proud of what I saw, and in every way I felt they were equal to, and probably in some ways an even better product than what I felt came through it during my time at the Academy and representing my own class. So I'm really a believer in the product that the Academy is putting out these days, and the path that we're on to get to a result like that. Okay, so less math and statistics, more pictures. So maybe this is the part where a different academic department took over the slides or something like that. I'm not really sure. I'll get into a little bit more pictures. What I want to tell you is a little bit more about our program here and what we do. So it all starts with indoctrination. Indoctrination is about a 3-week program that starts typically in the last week of July and runs through the middle of August. 272 started this year, 270 finished. We did lose a couple along the way. It's run primarily by midshipmen who come up from the Naval Academy, first-class midshipmen. This year, about 60% of them were prior NAPSers, which was really good for us to get prior NAPSers back here. The ownership of that process and the investment in that process of those midshipmen was palpable because they really felt like they were shaping, the future of them or, their successors. And that was very palpable, and it was a really good thing to see. I was extremely impressed with what I saw. After we come through indoctrination, this is an idea of what our academic year looks like. We have just finished midterm 1. We're on a trimester schedule. We call them marking periods, marking period 1, 2, and 3. If you hear the midshipman candidates use those terms today, and we further subdivided into 6 midterm periods. We've just finished midterm 1, and we're well into midterm 2. A couple highlights of this year. Our open house event I've already talked about, where we bring their parents up here. It also corresponds to a home football game, so it's a great event here. Thanksgiving break, winter break, and spring break are on here. We do grant leave at each of those times for midshipman candidates to go home. What I didn't put on here is little Army-Navy competitions which go on. We do have a little Army-Navy game that will take place in November. That's a big deal here for the football team. We'll play them in basketball the night before. We'll have a little Army-Navy wrestling match during the year, so those will be some highlights of our year. We finish the year towards the middle of May. We do a passing review and a big graduation ball followed by a ceremony. And then they get about a month leave, actually closer to 6 weeks of leave before reporting for I-Day at the Academy. So what do they do on a daily basis? This is their schedule. Reveille is no later than 0600 in the morning. Some are up even earlier than that, whether it's watch duties or other various duties that they may have. And we run through 4 classes during the day. The class periods are 75 hours long, and I'll tell you what they're taking here in a second. We wrap up classes by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we get into an extra instruction period. Extra instruction is a big deal here. A real strength of our staff here are our supplemental instructors and our tutors. And during the EI period, both their instructors and a number of the tutors are available to them, and that is a real strength of our program because we find that a number of our students need that supplemental support. So we set aside a specific time of the day to do that. Then we get into physical training and sports period, which lasts about 2 hours. Before evening meal, followed by a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of housekeeping, and then an evening study period. And that's Monday through Friday. Now, on Friday, we wrap classes up by noon, and we spend all of Friday afternoon during military training. That's where we focus on leadership and ethics and character development. We also get into things like drill and inspection and other military training evolutions as well. Weekend routine typically involves study halls and some watch and other duties on Saturday mornings, and then typically Saturday afternoons and Sundays are liberty for midshipman candidates. And depending on their academic standing and their performance standing, depends on the amount of liberty, the amount of overnights that they'll have, and so forth. In terms of academics, we're doing 4 core classes: math, chemistry, physics, and English. And we are also focusing on learning skills and study skills. That's that study skill as well. They take math every day. They take chemistry, physics, and English 4 times a week, and they also go to study skills. I've already mentioned the classes are 45 minutes long, and we have 3 tracks: a foundational track, an intermediate track, and an advanced track. It's normal to have about 40 to 45% in the foundational track. It's normal to have 35 to 40% in the intermediate track, and it's normal to have 15 to 20% in that advanced track. A number of midshipman candidates who do well here go on to validate some classes, particularly those in the advanced tracks, do go on to validate physics, chemistry, and a semester or 2 of mathematics at the academy, but that's really not the goal. The goal, of course, is the foundational piece. That's the core of what we do, is to get them ready for those classes in the academy. But for some of our high achievers who do validate classes, we do have programs for high achievers as well. And that sets them up to do some pretty cool things at the Naval Academy. I'm sure you guys have seen this, and if you haven't, I'll just tell you that Forbes magazine came out with their college rankings a month or 2 ago and ranked the Naval Academy as the number 20 college or university nationwide and the number 1 public university in the nation. And if you go to the academy today and you look at the academic programs that they have, they're phenomenal. And the opportunities for study and to do some pretty amazing academic work there with what the programs they have at the academy are pretty tremendous. So I see us doing a lot of good things for midshipman candidates here. For a lot of them, we're just getting them ready to do well as a freshman student at the Naval Academy. For others, some of our high achievers, we're really getting them ready to take full advantage of this tremendous academic program at the number 1 public university in the country. So we're really able to answer, I think, on both ends of that spectrum. In terms of athletics, you can see we have 98 recruited athletes this year. They're across 11 different sports, both that's Navy and Coast Guard athletes all together. They're across 11 different sports. 7 of those sports we run at the academy. The other 4 are really athletes on their own. It's onesie-twosies, a volleyball player, a crew rower, that we'll work with them on conditioning and preparing themselves to play their sport, but they're really here for some academic foundations before they move on. You can see what the sports are listed there now. All of the sports are in training now. Of course, Mark Donahue continues to run a really good cross-country program as well and gets involved with track in the spring as well. So that also tends to be a very popular sport here as well. He's got 40 runners out this year, and a couple of them are really pretty phenomenal. We also have some intramurals that go on, and we are already seeing a tremendous improvement across the board in our physical performance of our midshipman candidates, really getting themselves ready for physical foundation. So in addition to our sports programs, we also have a PT program to just raise the bar for everybody's physical condition when they go to the academy. The Commandant and the Deputy Commandant were up here last year up here last week for the first time in the Academy's history. Both the Commandant and the Deputy Commandant are both NAPSers. One of them is Rob Chadwick from NAPS 87. He's very sorry, by the way. He's very sorry, by the way, he can't be here today. He's got other commitments down at the Academy. He wanted to be here. He was here last week. And he worked out with us. And he was really impressed with the workouts that we did and how in shape he saw the midshipman candidates being. So we're very proud of the physical fitness programs that we run. And then I talked about military training. Military training is really a number of different things that we do to prepare them both a little bit of military science, but mostly focusing on character development, leadership and ethics. It's those moral foundations that we're trying to build to make them successful at the Academy. Some of the things you see up here include some guest speakers, and of course, we favor guest speakers who are former NAPSers. You can see General Renforth up there in the top right corner, one of the favorite former NAPSer guest speakers who we have up here whenever we can. You can see drill, the mess nights that we do, and in the bottom left here is something really pretty cool. And if you have the opportunity to see the ship, and maybe you'll see it when you're out and about in Newport this weekend, the Alumni Perry is a school sailing vessel that's been started up by a foundation here in Rhode Island. It's a tall-masted ship, 15 feet in length or so. I've been out on her, tremendous experience. We have an opportunity every year where some of our midshipman candidates are able to go out on the Alumni Perry and stand watch and run a true tall-masted ships, hauling on halyards and doing all that cool stuff. So it's a pretty well-rounded program that we look to continue to strengthen, focusing on leadership development, character development, and those moral foundations. Okay, I'm wrapping it up here. The last couple slides are a trip down memory lane. So these are some things you may remember about NAPS in your day and how NAPS may have changed, either for the better or for the worse, depending on your point of view, from then till now. This one is a constant source of miscontent, no matter how much we get paid here. I remember feeling insulted myself while I was at the academy, but that continues. I've already mentioned it's nearly all civilian instructors these days. That's a little bit different than our counterparts at Air Force and Army. Air Force and Army still use about a mix of 50-50 civilian and military faculty. We've gone over to civilian faculty here. I've talked about EI, I've talked about our athletic staff, and of course IT is a big deal here now. And we're on the way towards having a wireless campus here. We look to achieve that within the next year, where we'll go largely to a notebook-based and wireless campus here at NAPS, because that's what they're going to experience down at the academy. So one more, then and now. I personally was sorry to see the Ditto machine go. I really enjoyed that one. Get that little bugs from the purple paper that the teachers would hand out to you. But everything is networked these days. We do spoil them with a little bit of air conditioning. Yes, we do. Ripley Hall is actually air conditioned, and we do actually help keep them awake a little bit in their classes with some air conditioning in a few classrooms. In any case, we're pretty proud of what we're doing here, and it's built upon, of course, the foundations that all of you provide here. So I'd like to think that what you're going to see while you're here, you consider to be as good or better as what you remember. I know when I go to the academy, I'm constantly impressed by what I see. I'm constantly impressed mostly by the striving for excellence, the commitment to improve. And that's what I like to think about when I think about NAPS, is just our commitment to improve, our commitment to do a better job every year. We take a lot of pride in our own class and our own experience, but we want to see it get better for those who come behind us. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm honored to be here and have the opportunity to do this. And hopefully what you'll see today reassures you that that's what we're about. If you want to follow us, if you haven't already found us on social media or on the web, there's a couple of spots. And then we're into the question and answer period. I've left about 10 minutes for that. To answer any questions you may have before the midshipman candidates get in. So anything at all that you might have thought about as I work my way through the PowerPoint slides. Any questions I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that you now have all civilian instructors. Was that a conscious decision, and why?
So I wasn't here for that decision, but yes, it would have been made consciously. I can't tell you why, but I can tell you what I think the decision was based on and what I think we've gotten out of that. I think we've gotten a lot of continuity out of that.
What was the question? Can you repeat the question?
What was the decision to go to 100% civilian instructors? So we've probably got, between Carl and Rich and a few other faces that I see out there, we've probably got the corporate knowledge here to explain the rationale behind the decision. But I'll tell you what I see out of that. I see a lot of continuity. I see a staff of civilian faculty who are tremendously committed and bring continuity to our program. Now, of course, what you potentially lose are the examples of current military instructors. We accomplish that, of course, through our battalion staff and the interaction we have there. A number of our civilian faculty are either retired or a number of them currently serving reservists. So while a number of our civilian faculty are represented as civilians in the classroom, a number of them are actually still reservists or retired military officers as well. So I think we still capture some of that representation of military in the classroom. But what I think we get out of that is a very college-like setting. Now, on the flip side of that, if you go to the academy, they're still 50-50. So there is something, obviously something to be said for military faculty as well. Do any of the other staff and faculty who are here, Steve or Rich, or want to comment on the shift to an all-civilian faculty? Any other insights you can share on that? Okay. Rich says I hit the wave top, so we'll leave it at that. Yes, sir.
For the past couple of years, I've sat on my congressman's board for selecting
Thank you for doing that.
candidates for the academies. And for some of the candidates, I've strongly recommended considering Naval Academy Prep School. When you showed the completion rate and then appointments to the academy, how many do not get appointments, although they have completed here? How many don't get to go to the academy? I remember from the class of '67, where I believe we had 75 regular and 75 reserve SecNav appointments, and everybody else had to go find one on their own.
Yeah.
How does that work out for somebody who can finish?
Ultimately, everybody gets an appointment. Appointments end up not being a limitation. And Mark can probably jump in here and help with this question, where my knowledge might be a little bit short. So we encourage them all to go get a congressional nomination while they're here at NAPS, a congressional appointment, because the Academy wants to cover down on all 50 states and get an appointment and get all of Congress represented. For those who do not, there are SecNav appointments, there are presidential vice presidents, there are other types of appointments that they will get. So ultimately, they'll apply for all the various types of appointments that they are eligible for while they're here. An appointment does not end up being a limiting factor. So nobody fails to move on because they don't get an appointment, even if it's not a congressional appointment. Mark, any other?
I think you mean nomination, vice appointment, nomination.
Yeah.
Appointments they get if they successfully complete here. Used to be enough SecNav. They were limited by law the number of SecNavs, and they can apply to all those forces that are able to. We don't run out.
Okay. As the class of 18 enters, any other questions